The rain beat down against the cracked window of Clara James's apartment, turning the world outside into a blur of gray streaks and neon reflections. She sat at the edge of her sagging bed, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other clutching her phone. At 22, Clara felt much older than her years. Life had stolen the sparkle from her eyes long before this pregnancy, though she still carried herself with a quiet dignity that no hardship could fully erase. The buzz of a new message startled her. She swiped at the cracked screen, expecting a reminder about her overdue rent. Instead, what she read made her stomach drop. Greater than, let's invite the little intern to the gala. Imagine her walking in with her thrift store clothes. The CEO will laugh himself sick. There was a string of laughing emojis, followed by a photo of a glittering gold-embossed invitation. Clara's lips parted as she scrolled further. They were talking about her. Her chest burned with humiliation. She remembered her brief time as an intern at Cross Enterprises, fetching coffee, running errands, often invisible. She had left after missing too many days while caring for her sick mother, but apparently she had left enough of an impression to be their joke. Clara almost deleted the message, almost convinced herself it wasn't worth a second thought. But her reflection in the darkened window, tired eyes, rounded belly, stared back at her accusingly. Why should she always shrink? Why should she let them laugh at her? Something inside her, fragile but fierce, sparked to life. She didn't have money for gowns or glittering jewelry, but she had something better, her mother's old navy dress, carefully altered to fit her new body. It was simple, but elegant. And Clara decided she would wear it, not to prove herself to them, but to herself. 3 nights later, Clara stood before the gilded doors of the Grand Marlowe Hotel. A doorman glanced at her invitation, raised an eyebrow at her figure, then stepped aside. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she walked into the ballroom. The room glittered like a dream, chandeliers dripping with crystals, guests in designer gowns, the murmur of wealth and power. The moment she entered, conversations paused. Eyes swept over her, some narrowing, some widening, whispers flitting like moths in the air. Among them, the group who had sent the cruel message gawked openly. Clara lifted her chin, her hand steady on the curve of her belly. Let them stare, she was not their joke. And then she felt it, his gaze. Damien Cross, the youngest CEO in the city, infamous for his ruthless deals and magnetic presence. He stood near the stage, champagne glass in hand, his tailored suit as sharp as the cut of his jaw. When his eyes found hers, they locked there, unblinking. For the first time that evening, the unshakable Damien looked, stunned. Clara swallowed, her throat tight. She hadn't planned for this, not really. She hadn't planned for the way her stomach twisted when she remembered that night, months ago, when Damien had offered her a ride home after finding her crying in the stairwell about her mother's medical bills. He had been kind then, almost human. One moment of comfort had turned into something else, something she had carried ever since. Clara turned away, forcing herself to breathe, but soon she sensed him moving. A ripple went through the crowd as Damien crossed the floor toward her. "Miss James," he said, his voice deep, steady, though his eyes betrayed something more unsettled. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I wasn't expecting an invitation." His jaw tightened. "That wasn't from me. I figured as much," Clara said softly. "Apparently, your employees find it amusing to drag people like me into your world as a joke." Damien's eyes flicked past her, and she saw the group of whispering employees shrink under his glance. But when his gaze returned to her, it softened. Or perhaps it sharpened, she couldn't tell. Because now he wasn't just looking at her face. His eyes lingered on her rounded belly. "You're expecting." Clara's hand instinctively shifted to her stomach. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said quickly, though the word seemed torn from him. He looked at her with an intensity that made her want to flee. "It's just unexpected." She began to turn away, but his hand caught hers, not forceful, but certain. "Clara," he said quietly, and the sound of her name on his lips froze her. "Who's the father?" Her breath hitched. "That's none of your business." But Damien's eyes told her he already suspected. His voice dropped, roughened. "It's mine, isn't it?" Her silence was answer enough. The air between them shifted, thick with unspoken memories. He remembered too, how she had laughed for the first time in months that night, how one vulnerable confession had melted into another, how their lips had met as if it were the only thing that made sense. He had thought it a fleeting moment, a secret both would bury. But here she stood, carrying proof of it beneath her heart. "It's mine," he said again, more firmly this time, as though he needed to claim it aloud. Clara's throat tightened. You don't owe me anything. I never planned to tell you. I didn't come here for you. I came because I won't be anyone's joke. But Damien wasn't looking at her like a man thinking of jokes. His expression was raw, stripped of his usual composure. Clara, I should have known. I should have found you. He stopped, then lowered his voice, almost pleading. Come with me, please. Against her better judgment, she let him lead her out onto the balcony, the cool night air rushing over them. The city stretched below, glittering with possibility. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Damien turned to her, his eyes burning with something she had never expected to see in him, regret. I've spent my life controlling everything. Every deal, every decision, every risk calculated. But you, his voice faltered. That night was the first time I forgot all of it. And now, you're carrying my child. Clara's breath shook. And what do you want me to do with that, Damien? Pretend it means something. Pretend you'll suddenly be a father, when men like you never stay. He flinched, but didn't back away. I don't want to pretend. I want to be there. For you, for the baby, if you'll let me. Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to believe him. But how could she? And if tomorrow you change your mind? If I'm just another mistake to sweep aside? You're not a mistake, Damien said fiercely. You're the bravest woman I've ever met. You walked in there tonight knowing they wanted to laugh at you, and you held your head high. You're not like anyone else in that room. And Clara, his voice softened. You left me stunned the moment I saw you. Her chest ached, caught between disbelief and longing. He sounded sincere, he looked sincere, and part of her, a part she had tried to smother for months, wanted desperately to trust him. But trust was not something Clara gave easily anymore. She turned her face toward the city lights, tears slipping free. I don't need a savior, Damien. I just need to be strong enough for this child. And you are, he whispered. His hand brushed hers again, tentative, reverent. But maybe you don't have to be alone anymore. The silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. Finally, Clara let out a trembling breath. She didn't take his hand fully, not yet, but she didn't pull away either. For the first time in months, she felt something stir inside her chest besides fear. Not certainty, not yet. But possibility, and sometimes, possibility was enough. Rain streaked down the cracked window of Clara James's tiny apartment, blurring the neon lights outside into a watercolor haze. She hugged her threadbare sweater close, rubbing her belly in slow circles. At 22, Clara felt ancient with exhaustion. The pregnancy had already drained her, but it was the weight of everything else, her mother's illness, the unpaid bills, the loneliness, that truly bent her shoulders. Her phone buzzed on the chipped counter. She sighed, expecting yet another reminder from her landlord. Instead, she saw a message in a group chat from her old workplace, where she had briefly interned before life had swallowed her whole. Greater than, let's invite the little intern to the gala. Imagine her walking in with her thrift store clothes. The CEO will laugh himself sick. A picture followed. A gold-embossed invitation for the annual Cross Enterprises charity gala. Heat rushed to Clara's cheeks. She had been invisible at that office, fetching coffee, sorting files, always overlooked. When her absences grew too many because of hospital visits with her mother, they had quietly let her go. And now she was a punchline. Her first instinct was to delete the message and crawl deeper into her hole of invisibility. But then her gaze fell to her reflection in the window, tired eyes, yes, but still alive. Still fighting. For once, she thought, maybe she shouldn't hide. Maybe she should show up, not because she belonged in their glittering world, but because she refused to be their joke. The night of the gala, Clara stood before the mirrored doors of the Grand Marlowe Hotel. She wore her mother's navy dress, carefully altered to fit her new curves. Modest but graceful, it skimmed her figure and accented the undeniable swell of her belly. Inside, the ballroom glowed under chandeliers. Diamonds and designer gowns glittered as waiters floated by with trays of champagne. The moment Clara walked in, the air shifted. Heads turned, whispers rose. The group of employees who had mocked her gaped openly, their laughter stifled by shock. Clara walked forward with her chin high, heart pounding. She wasn't here for them. She was here to prove to herself that she was more than their cruel entertainment. But then her gaze snagged on him. Damien Cross, CEO, youngest self-made billionaire in the city, a man whose reputation was all sharp edges and untouchable power. He stood near the stage, a glass of champagne in hand, conversing with investors. Until he saw her. His dark eyes locked onto Clara, and for the first time in his carefully calculated career, Damien Cross looked utterly stunned. His gaze swept over her face, down to her rounded belly, then back again. Clara's heart stuttered. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to even remember her, let alone stare at her as if the ground beneath him had shifted. But he did, and in his eyes, she caught something she hadn't seen in anyone else's tonight. Not scorn, not laughter, but recognition. Part 2. Clara tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. The moment Damien started moving toward her, the crowd parted instinctively. He reached her in moments, his presence overwhelming, his expression unreadable. "Miss James," he said, voice low but steady. "I wasn't expecting you." She met his gaze, forcing her own voice not to tremble. "Neither was I." His eyes flicked toward the employees who had set her up, then back to her. "That invitation didn't come from me." "I know," she said, her chin high. "But they sent it, and I came. I won't be anyone's joke." Damien studied her, his eyes lingering again on her stomach. "You're expecting." Clara stiffened, resting a hand protectively over her belly. "Yes. Is that going to be tonight's entertainment?" "No." His tone was clipped, but his gaze was rawer than she'd ever seen. "Just unexpected." She turned as if to leave, but his hand caught her wrist. "Clara," he said softly, and the way he spoke her name froze her. "Who's the father?" Her chest tightened. "That's none of your concern." But Damien's eyes widened slightly, realization dawning. "It's mine." She looked away, but her silence was answer enough. The world seemed to tilt. Damien remembered the night months ago when he had found her crying in the stairwell after work, broken by medical bills and exhaustion. He had offered her a ride home, and against all reason, a night of comfort had bloomed between them. He hadn't forgotten, but he had buried it under deals and deadlines. Now, here she was, carrying proof of it under her heart. "It's mine," he said again, firmer this time. Clara's throat ached. "You don't owe me anything, Damien. I didn't come here for you. I came because I refused to be laughed at." But Damien wasn't looking at her like a man thinking of laughter. His face was stripped bare of the cold mask the world always saw. "Clara, I should have known. I should have found you. His words broke off, then steadied. "Please, come with me." Just for a moment, against her better judgment, she let him guide her outside onto the balcony. The city stretched below, glowing like 1,000 opportunities she'd never been offered. Damien leaned on the railing, his composure cracking. "I've lived my life in control. Everything calculated, but that night with you, it was the first time I forgot everything. And now," his eyes dropped to her stomach. "Now there's a life, our life." Clara blinked back tears. "And what do you expect me to do with that? Believe you'll suddenly want to be a father? Believe you won't walk away?" He stepped closer, his voice fierce but trembling. "I don't want to walk away. I want to be here. For you, for the baby, if you'll let me." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but her heart had been shattered before. "And if tomorrow you change your mind? If I'm just a mistake to hide?" Damien's gaze burned into hers. "You're not a mistake. You're the bravest woman I've ever met. You walked into that ballroom knowing they wanted to humiliate you, and you held your head high. You left me speechless tonight, Clara. Just like you did that night." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wanted to hold onto her armor, but his words pierced straight through. She didn't take his hand yet, but she didn't pull away either. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the city humming below them. Finally, Clara whispered, "I don't need saving, Damien. I just need to be strong enough for this child." He reached for her hand again, gentle this time. "And you are. But maybe, you don't have to be alone anymore." Clara's heart ached, torn between fear and the fragile bloom of hope. She let herself breathe, let herself imagine, just for tonight, that possibility was real. And as she finally let his fingers entwine with hers, she realized something. The cruel invitation that had been meant to humiliate her had brought her face to face with the one person she hadn't dared to hope for. Maybe the world had wanted her to be a joke. But tonight, standing beside Damien Cross under the glittering city lights, Clara James felt like the start of a story no one else could write for her.